I have really been enjoying the conversations between Chad, the alcoholic, and Lance on the Randos United channel, talking about Alcoholics Anonymous and how it's really designed in a way to circumvent all the baggage that people have about religion and Christianity and church and God, and get them to approach that whole subject in another way so that they can get the help they need. And really, the help always does come from God, but it's not the image of God that they have from growing up, whatever experiences they have. And I got to talk to Chad a little bit on Friday. We did a thing on Grim Grizz channel, and then we got to continue our conversation on Jacob's channel for a while, and talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was able to kind of answer some of my questions a little bit. And I have a few more, and I'll probably bring those up. And he also got to share with me some messages that he wanted me to listen to from speakers at AA meetings. And I listened to this message a couple times, and it was really, really good. And it was really good, and it was almost just like, wow, this is a great testimony, like what I've heard many times. It sounded like a story that I had heard many times in church before. But, so, I would say it was a very Christian message, but he didn't explicitly say Christ. He did refer to God quite a bit. I think that's kind of the important part in the AA model, is that it's a God of your own understanding. And I do believe that that is a Christian concept, really, and especially a Protestant concept, in that God meets people where they're at. And the beautiful thing is that, the Christian tradition has always been open to translations. And, part of that is, we read the story of the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament, and, it's this idea that God divided all the nations, and he split up their language. And I've talked quite a bit on that, but the way I read it and the way it seems to make sense to me is that everybody, it's not just like, the one language got turned into a whole bunch of different languages, and they were all different versions of the same thing or whatever. But whatever the language before was, it got divided. And so everybody had an incomplete language, a piece of a language. And that meant that they had to work together to figure out, what was going on with their neighbors. And so out of that division, which, we don't know exactly how many, it kind of says 70 nations, but, within those nations, we don't know how well the communication was going. It may have been that even within those nations, people's language was further divided, and they had to work things out and figure out how to communicate. So, you start with things like hieroglyphics, which is just drawing pictures, and a picture, like, what are you talking about? You draw a picture of a cow. Oh, you're talking about the cow. And the other guy has a different word for cow, and then you figure out how to combine cow with an idea in your language. And, and I think my personal theory, which I've talked about a little bit, is that because there is some of that loss, that it wasn't just like, it's not like you take the alphabet and you just shift all the letters over, and A equals B, and B equals C, and C equals D, like a code. But these languages are very different. They have different rules, different structures, different ideas and concepts. And we know that sometimes one word can't be translated into another language easily. And so you maybe can translate it by taking one word and describing it with a phrase, a whole bunch of words, or it may be something that you have to write a lot of commentary on. Or you might just take that word into your language because you don't have a word for it, and then you got to still write a definition to put in your dictionary or whatever. And so I think that God, as as languages the Bible's translated into languages, and people are sharing this information, they have to cope with the fact that it's not always perfectly analogous. It doesn't map on 100%. And so, the Bible in Latin has a different meaning than the Bible in Greek. And people will argue about and say, well, the Greek is the original language, and so then the Latin made all the mistakes, and that's bad. But I think that there are some, and it could be that some things are problematic because of that, but it could also be that new understanding of the whole picture comes because of that. It's not an either or, it's sort of a both and. And so then when you have these multiple peoples understanding things in different ways, the picture of the thing itself becomes more clear. And it really, AA to me kind of seems like it fits that mold in some sense. And I remember somewhere that C.S. Lewis talked about how, I don't know, somebody wrote letters, or there was a concern that kids, were reading his Narnia books. And in the Narnia books, of course, Jesus is represented by Aslan. And the parents were kind of concerned because they were like, my child loves Aslan more than they love Jesus. And this is bad. Like, what's going to happen? They're not praying to Jesus, they're praying to Aslan. I don't know if they were praying to Aslan or whatever, but Aslan had captured their imagination more than the stories of Jesus had. But of course, to those who know Jesus, the parallels between Jesus and the story of Aslan are very clear. And I think C.S. Lewis, whatever he communicated, was, something to the effect of like, well, in time they're going to see it. Like, that's okay. Like, and I do think that is okay, because it's helping them. Like the names are not the same. So maybe you could say Aslan is the incorrect name for the person Jesus Christ, but the story of Aslan communicates the truth of the story of Jesus. And so the pattern that's created in your mind is correct. And then once you see a pattern that's the same as another pattern, it's very easy to map on the details, and just connect that to the thing. Once because you've done the hard work of understanding the picture, and now you're just expanding on the details and the names. And I think that every time you do that, it does bring a richer, fuller understanding of it. So the person who has incorporated the Narnia picture of the gospel into their understanding has a richer understanding than the person who only has the gospel alone. And then when you add other versions of that thing, other parallels, it just becomes more and more clear. And I think that really kind of seems to me to map onto some of the experience of Alcoholics Anonymous, in that it's putting aside names and titles, because names and titles and things like that can be a stumbling block. And it even is even though it's saying the God of your own understanding, it refers to this as, it doesn't even necessarily need to be referred to as a God, but as a power that's greater than yourself. And I think that that was the really interesting thing about the message that Chad shared with me, which I'll put a link to, is that, you know, it was really about this thing of wrestling with your own powerlessness. And I think that for the alcoholic, while being powerless to alcoholism is a terrible thing, it's because it's so terrible, it gives the alcoholic a unique opportunity to wrestle with that powerlessness, which is not unique to alcoholics. It's something that all human beings share in common. In the case of the alcoholic, the thing that they have put as an idol in their life is so destructive for their own life and in their community, their families, the lives of others around them, their ability to, function in society, that it really necessitates that they do something about it. And from listening to that speaker and listening to Chad as well, and Lance and others, many other people who, it may not have been the mechanism of Alcoholics Anonymous, but those who have been in bondage to things like drug addiction, or sex addiction or pornography addiction, but specifically even more the drugs and the alcohol, because they are so, physically constricting, and they have such a power over our bodies that, that the inability to control yourself is really much more apparent. But any of those people, when they come to a place of deliverance from that, it always is preceded by them realizing that they don't have the power to do it in themselves. And, for those who maybe know that, well, I got to be careful about going to parties, because at a party I can drink too much and I can really get into some trouble. But they don't have a problem with a couple beers at dinner, or at a, going to a concert and having a beer or whatever. That person is not controlled by alcohol the same way. So for them, they know they do have the power to put it aside. And perhaps if they had a reason why to abstain entirely, they would be able to do it. For instance, I've known some people who maybe they came from a background where drinking was done responsibly. Like I would say, from my growing up, my parents, the occasional glass of wine, especially if it's a nice dinner, maybe on a holiday. You could have a cocktail or something before dinner on Thanksgiving or Christmas, but no one was getting drunk. And it was probably, 3 drinks maximum, and for many people just the one. And so, it wasn't a big deal. Like, I tasted a little sip of this stuff, like, oh, that's that strong tasting stuff that grown-ups drink, as a kid. There's the mixed drinks tasted a little better than some of the other things, and that's how it goes. But somebody could grow up in an environment like that, and for them it's perfectly okay to drink. But if they get married to somebody who was raised by alcoholics, even if that person doesn't struggle with alcoholism, it might be, say, oh, I'm not going to drink because this makes you feel anxious and upset and troubles you, and so we don't have to have alcohol in our house at all. Even though that person could drink and it wouldn't affect them negatively, that would be a loving choice they could make for some other person. Or, if you If you wanted to work at a church, and some churches have policies about that sort of thing. Some churches have policies against alcohol, or maybe for their staff, that their staff not partake of alcohol. And that could be because it's just not, they've decided it's not a wise thing to do. Because, if you could be in the position of counseling others who do have a serious addiction problem, your insistence to say that it's okay for me to drink alcohol, but you have a problem with it, so you shouldn't, is very confusing. And I think that, anything that you're willing to give up just for the sake of saying, it's not wise for me to do this, is a good and admirable thing. Anything that you're willing to give up for the sake of others, and you can give up for the sake of others, that's a good thing. It's an admirable thing. But the thing is that even if that's how you relate to something like alcohol, there is something in all of us which we are powerless to live without on our own accord, by our own power. And for the sake of the alcoholic, they are confronted with that reality because the thing which grips them is so powerful. But for other people, you may have something that you don't realize you're totally in the grip of, because it's socially acceptable and it's a normal thing, and it may be even a good thing, and it could be something that you really can't live without, like food, or the way that people treat you, the way that people look up to you, being in control, the way that we speak, or it could be something like, flirting with people to kind of get that attention. You might not ever get in trouble for that if you don't do it in a serious enough way. Because for some people it may not be necessarily that they're desiring an affair. It just makes them feel good to be admired by people in that way, and so that might be a area in which they really, the fact that they are not wrestling with it, they're not trying to give it up, is holding them back from realizing their ultimate need for God. And because they can live a life that is socially acceptable and nobody's going to criticize them too much for their behavior, it's not going to impact their job, it's not going to impact their family, or whatever the thing might be, they may not come to the end of their own ability to control it and realize the power that it has in their life. And I think that is something that, while the alcoholic has a very difficult thing that they struggle with, at least they become aware of their struggle. For many people, they do not become aware of their struggle. So the talk really reminded me of a book that has had a big impact on me, and that's the book Counterfeit Gods by Tim Keller, who, these days is getting a little bit of criticism because of his political views. But that book is really fantastic, and you can't take that away. And I would recommend that people read it, because what it really deals with is this idea that all of us have some hope, the functional hope of our heart, I think is the way he puts it, and that is our God. It's our idol, and it's the thing that, as long as we have it, we feel safe, and when it's taken away from us, we feel threatened. And it really, it can take any shape, any form, and oftentimes we may dethrone one of these idols from our heart, but if we're not replacing that with God, and I would say Jesus Christ more specifically, then something else will take its place. And this is the kind of representative of the story of Jesus talks about a man who's being troubled by demons, and cast the demons out, but the house is swept, everything's clean, everything's in order. But if you don't fill that space up, then 7 more demons will come in and they'll make it twice as bad as it was before. And this is really the thing is that it's not enough to desire the removal of the negative things in our life, whatever our negative habits are. We need to replace those idols with the proper object of worship. And the speech, basically, he gave a perfectly similar thought in talking about how somebody spoke to him and talked about the first commandment of having no other gods before you. And he said that for the alcoholics, the hard thing most of the time is getting past the part of thou shalt not, because that, they say, nobody, don't tell me what to do. And because their instinct is to say, don't tell me what to do, they don't even listen to the rest of the sentence. And this guy who's sharing with him tells him that what worship is not necessarily bowing down and these acts of sacrifice or burning incense or any of those things, but it's what we are devoting our attention to, and if our whatever our attention is fixed on, that's the thing we're worshiping. And that's kind of the same perfect example that or definition that Tim Keller kind of gives in his book as to how worship works and how we do that towards our idols. And the speaker gives a couple examples, because he talks about how at this point he had just ended a relationship and he was just so obsessed with the thinking about it, and because being in that relationship had become a functional hope of his heart. He had been sober for a while, and this was the first relationship he had while he was remaining sober, and when it ended, he was very devastated, which is normal, but he was obsessing over it because he had put so much hope in this thing that he expected it to be the, his salvation, basically. And that's what we do with our idols, is we always expect them to be the thing that gives us salvation. And he spoke about, relationships and sex can be that way, and money can be that way. And he said basically the amount of money that we, that will be enough is however much money you need, so that you don't need God anymore. And and it's going to be $5 more than you ever get too. So it's an illusion. It's an illusion, and I think that's one of the reasons why, for those who live lives of celebrity, and have all the things that people can only imagine that a person could have and achieve, so many of them end up in these terrible places of addiction and trying to soothe themselves because they made an idol out of celebrity status, fame, fortune, etc. And having achieved that, realized that it was not a suitable God. if the thing that is your idol is something that you can achieve, then you will realize that it does not satisfy the way you wanted it to. Unfortunately, if your idol is something that you cannot achieve, then you're in a position of, always being kind of delusional about what, what your life could be like. But anyway, I think that it's really, it's really interesting that part of it, which is this identification of idols and realizing that we're powerless to do anything about it on our own, it's so central to the Christian idea. And for me, it makes sense of why I kind of prefer the Calvinist way of looking at things, because even though there is an acceptance of your powerlessness, that's just giving up on the stubborn refusal to look at things the way they actually are. And I think that the problem I have is that for those who insist that their choice to come to Christ was their choice, and that it was their free will that brought them to that position, I feel that it's very easy for that free will concept even to become an idol, because it's not Christ that saved you at that point. It's you who saved you by choosing Christ. And it's not to say that there's no choice whatsoever, but that's why I think that the total depravity concept is not this horrible idea that why would you say you're totally depraved? That means you're a horrible person. Well, we all are horrible people in some sense. And in regard to that first commandment of putting no other gods before God, we're the worst. And we always will seek an alternative. We'll seek every alternative before we turn to God. And the idea that our heart is always trying to find the way to get the things that God has for us without getting God himself, it rings true to my experience very much. And there's the thing that you won't give up, that maybe made an idol, and it could be so many things. It could be an idea, and I think this may be the problem that Alcoholics Anonymous sort of circumvents, where say, like, I don't want to listen to anything about God or church or Jesus, but instead of trying to communicate with you on words, you're speaking a different language. So instead, someone draws a picture, and they draw a picture of a pattern of understanding and reality, and that pattern makes sense of your life. And then you realize that you are powerless, and it's not your choice that delivers you from that power, it's your surrender. And that's why even in the simplest versions of kind of a Christian evangelism, the first thing is that you must admit you are a sinner, because God cannot save someone who doesn't think that they need to be saved. And so, to whatever degree, you have to come to the point of understanding that there's something in your life that you don't have the power to do. Now, you might be making things work okay, and your life might be in pretty good shape, but there's something where it's not in control, and it may not be horrible, it may not be drastic, it may not be the level of ruin that alcohol addiction would cause you, but it's still true. You don't have a handle on that thing. And the only way you could get a handle on that thing is to surrender it and to admit that you need help and you need a Savior. And so I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about this Alcoholics Anonymous model, is that it cuts away all the baggage. And there's so much baggage, that people have with church and God in general and Christ in specific. And, it makes me think of I did that video a long time ago now, several months ago anyway, where I was so distraught about the artist that was talking to Jordan Peterson about his experience in these residential schools in Canada, and that the priests and the nuns acted so horribly and so absolutely diametrically opposite of the way that Christ would have acted, but their words and their titles and the names on their lips was of the Bible and of Jesus Christ. And what they did is they used the right labels and they put it on a completely wrong pattern. And so that man, Charles Joseph, there was no way that he could accept the pattern that they were showing him with the names. And so he found his deliverance in the folk religion of his ancestors. And, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would probably say that because he did not accept the right propositional understanding of Christianity, that he is going to hell. And I think that, well, if you changed all the names in the Bible and you changed God's name to the devil and the devil's name to God, then you would the pattern would still be the same. And so the issue of the translation, I think, goes beyond just different languages of different nations, but I think it even goes to the individual. And for the gracious God who loves everybody, he's going to, in a sense, accept the worship of Aslan from the person who cannot love and accept Jesus because they've been told lies. And, it reminds me of a horrible story that I heard in a podcast talking about these women who deal with trauma survivors who have gone through horrendous psychological things, and a lot of this is at the hands of actual, real Satanists, and talking about these as children, these people who are put in a horrendous situation, and and they will be told call on the name of Jesus, and they call on the name of Jesus, and then somebody comes out dressed as Jesus and does horrible things to them, and it basically scars their mind. And it actually, it's really interesting because they were actually talking about how the split personality disorder, whatever the technical term is at the moment, that's such a horrible thing, and that we say, like, this is a mental illness and this is bad. And they're saying, well, this is part of the way that God created people, and it's actually not, maybe, that's like, a lot of people will probably say that's a result of the fall. But it may not be. It's because what it is it's a protective mechanism in our brain. And when something horrible happens, our brain basically takes that and shuts it away, and in doing that, it may cause us to lose some aspects of our personality and the things that we had become used to in the way that we communicate, in the way that we think of ourselves. Because, person 1.0 has now been defiled in a horrible way. And so the brain says, start over. And it takes, some aspect of general functionality and basically starts a new personality in that person where they're able to completely disassociate from that negative experience and still be able to function in life. Now, at a certain point, and this is what these people deal with, some of those things need to come to light so that the person can be made whole and they can resolve, and come to terms with some of this trauma that was inflicted upon them. But if somebody's been so horribly lied about the names, what is that? That's a bad translation. It's not that because in their brain, every time they hear the name of Jesus, it's not showing them the picture of Jesus that's in the Bible. It's showing them something else entirely. And, there could be a lot of debate about, well, then does that mean that all the religions are the same? No, it doesn't mean that. And for the thinking person, the person who is examining the roots and the foundations of their worldview, and gets down to the nitty-gritty of it, there is a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of problems with a lot of other world religions and a lot of other worldviews and ideologies. And some would even say there is with Christianity, and there definitely is within certain sects of Christianity. And sometimes it's impossible to know what is the incorrect knowledge about your own branch of Christianity. We are all certainly wrong about something, but we don't know exactly what parts that is that we're wrong about. So for those who are coming from a rational mind and are open to choosing something and trying to find the best choice and the worldview that conforms the most to reality, for that person, I think that Christianity is the best choice. But for those who are unable to even conceive of that, for the person who's drowning, essentially, spiritually drowning, and all that they know is that they are powerless to save themselves, and they call out on a name, then I believe that whatever name they may say with their mouth, if the pattern is the pattern of Christianity and the pattern of the God who paid the price for our mistakes and who did everything to redeem us, then, that must be enough. And, these are these things people always want to debate about and go, talk about all these weird hypotheticals and stuff. But if God can understand translation, which I believe he does, then he knows the heart. And the heart is what matters more than the words. And the pattern, the shape of reality is more important than the labels of reality. So I think that that's a really interesting thing about what Alcoholics Anonymous has to offer in helping maybe Christians to understand some of this stuff, and especially those that are more dogmatic about the sort of propositional arguments about, the correct belief and, doing things in the proper way. And all that stuff is good. And actually, and this is something that Chad spoke about a little bit in one of his talks too, is he was talking about that, he's going to go through all the tradition of the 12 steps, and he's going to hold firm to that and maintain it because he knows it works. And I think that is sort of the proper way to approach tradition, where even if there was a 13th step, and one of those, or if you could say maybe of the 12 steps, one of them is not necessary. I'm not saying this with any knowledge of, how they specifically work together. I'm more saying in a hypothetical sense, if you had a tradition, and your tradition had 12 steps, maybe only 10 or 11 of them are absolutely necessary, but if you start monkeying around with it and trying to figure out, which one you can get rid of, that's going to cause a lot of harm. Now, on the flip side of that, you could have a system that works really perfectly, and it really does what it's supposed to do with 12 steps. And then you'll have somebody who thinks, we could also really address this other issue if we just added another step. And, they will add that 13th step. And maybe that 13th step is not so great a burden that it really causes any difference in the effectiveness of the whole thing. But once you get a taste for that, then it becomes very easy to add a 14th step and a 15th step. And that is when traditions can become idols of their own. And because it becomes so much about trying to fulfill all of these specific points of correct activity and behavior, that the spirit of what was there is lost. And that's probably something I'll have to explore more fully in another video. But it was a really great talk, and I will include the link to that so anyone else can listen and check out the other talks with Chad and Lance. And I guess the little bit that we talked on Jacob's channel, we talked about just a little bit about a variety of things. And it was kind of like the after party to our blind elephant game. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and I would look forward to hearing any feedback that anyone has about that. And hopefully my understanding of things is not way off from the things that Chad was trying to communicate. So thank you.